What if I told you that the most terrifying moment in your soul's entire existence isn't death itself, but what happens when you're forced to confront every dark aspect of yourself that you've spent lifetimes trying to hide? Deep in the Tibetan Book of the Dead lies a teaching so intense, so psychologically profound, that it reveals the ultimate test of spiritual courage. After you fail to recognize the peaceful deities as your own enlightened nature, you enter what the ancient masters called the most challenging phase of the afterlife, the encounter with the wrathful deities. But these aren't external demons or evil spirits. The Bardo Thodol makes this crystal clear. These wrathful deities are not external or malevolent entities, but expressions of the mind itself, reflecting the passions and attachments that still bind the soul to the cycle of suffering. Think about that for a moment. Every emotion you've suppressed, every fear you've denied, every aspect of your shadow that you've refused to integrate, all of it manifests as terrifying beings with the power to either liberate you or trap you for lifetimes. The ancient text describes this confrontation with haunting detail. These visions are so real and filled with personal meaning that it becomes challenging to see beyond them. Imagine facing a deity that embodies your deepest rage, appearing with flaming hair and weapons that represent every moment of anger you've carried. Picture confronting a being that reflects your most hidden fears, manifesting with such intensity that it seems to threaten your very existence. But here's what makes this encounter the ultimate test of courage. These wrathful deities aren't trying to destroy you, they're trying to liberate you. The Bardo Thodol reveals that these wrathful deities are manifestations of anger, fear, and repressed desires that appear in fierce form to force you to transcend the very emotions that keep you trapped. Carl Jung understood this profound truth when he wrote about these teachings. Gods and demons are projections of the unconscious, powerful, and inescapable until understood as parts of ourselves. The question is, when you face the mirror of your own shadow in the afterlife, will you have the courage to embrace what you see, or will you flee in terror and remain trapped by the very fears you refuse to face? Today, you're going to discover exactly what these wrathful deities look like, why they appear, and most importantly, how to transform your terror into recognition, your fear into liberation. Picture this. You've just witnessed the most beautiful display of enlightened consciousness imaginable. The 42 peaceful Buddhas appearing in radiant glory, offering you liberation through love and wisdom. But something inside you recoiled. The light was too bright, the love too overwhelming, the perfection too much to accept. Now, as consciousness retreats from the peaceful deities, the Bardo realm begins to shift. The gentle lights fade, replaced by something far more intense. The serene faces transform into expressions of fierce determination. You're about to enter the realm of the wrathful deities, and nothing in your human experience has prepared you for what you're about to encounter. On the 8th day after death, from the center of your awareness, a dark brown light begins to emerge. But this isn't the gentle radiance of the peaceful Buddha. This light pulses with raw power, with an intensity that seems to shake the very foundations of consciousness itself. From this blazing darkness emerges Mahottara Heruka, the first of the wrathful deities. Picture a being of such terrifying majesty that every cell of your consciousness recognizes something both familiar and absolutely frightening. His body is dark brown, massive and imposing, with 3 heads representing the transformation of the 3 poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. His 6 arms hold weapons that would make your blood run cold: a vajra and bell, a small drum, a skull cup filled with blood, a curved knife, and a noose. His 9 eyes blaze with the fire of wisdom that cuts through all illusion. His hair streams upward like flames, and his mouth reveals fangs that seem capable of devouring entire worlds. Beside him stands his consort, Krodheshvari, equally fierce, equally terrifying. They're surrounded by 8 Karimas, female wrathful deities with animal heads: lion, tiger, fox, wolf, vulture, kite, raven, and owl. Each one represents a different aspect of transformed consciousness, but to the unprepared mind, they appear as the stuff of nightmares. But here's what the ancient masters understood. Mahottara Heruka isn't a demon from hell. He's the fierce aspect of your own Buddha nature, the part of your consciousness that's willing to destroy every illusion, every false identity, every comfortable lie you've been telling yourself. Those weapons he carries, they're not instruments of destruction, they're tools of liberation. The curved knife cuts through ego clinging. The skull cup holds the nectar of wisdom. The noose binds you to truth. Every terrifying aspect represents a quality of awakened consciousness that's fierce enough to break through your resistance to enlightenment. The Bardo Thodol instructs, "O child of noble family, do not be afraid of this wrathful deity. He is your own consciousness appearing in wrathful form. Recognize him as your own mind and do not flee in terror." But most souls, faced with this overwhelming display of fierce compassion, react with pure terror. They see Mahottara Heruka as an external threat, a demonic force trying to destroy them. So they flee, they resist, they fight, and in doing so, they miss another opportunity for liberation. And this is just the beginning. For the next 7 days, different wrathful deities will appear, each one more intense than the last, each one offering the same choice. Will you recognize this fierce being as your own awakened nature, or will you retreat in fear? Think about your own life. How many times have you been offered an opportunity for growth that felt terrifying? How often have you retreated from challenges that could have transformed you? The wrathful deities represent every fierce grace you've ever rejected because it didn't come wrapped in gentle packaging. But Mahottara Heruka is just the first of 58 wrathful deities that will test your courage. On the 9th day, you encounter beings even more intense, even more challenging to your sense of safety and control. What if I told you that on the 9th day after death, you encounter deities so fierce, so overwhelming in their intensity, that they're called the blood-drinking Herukas, not because they're vampires, but because they consume the very life force of ego and illusion? As consciousness continues its journey through the wrathful realm, the encounters become progressively more intense. The 9th day brings the appearance of the 5 blood-drinking Herukas, each one representing the wrathful transformation of the 5 Buddha families you encountered in their peaceful forms. From the eastern direction, a brilliant white light blazes forth, but this isn't the gentle radiance of peaceful Akshobhya. This is the fierce light of Buddha Heruka, whose very presence seems to shatter every comfortable assumption about spirituality and enlightenment. Buddha Heruka appears with a dark blue body, 3 heads, and 6 arms. In his hands, he holds a wheel, an axe, a sword, a vajra, a bell, and a skull cup. His central face is dark blue, his right face white, his left face red, representing the transformation of the 3 poisons into the 3 wisdom. His 9 eyes blaze with the fire that burns away all delusion. Beside him stands Buddha Krotasvari, his consort, equally fierce and terrifying. She holds a skull cup and a curved knife, her body dancing in the posture of fierce compassion. Together, they represent the union of wisdom and method in their most uncompromising form. But Buddha Heruka is just the beginning. Over the next 4 days, you encounter Vajra Heruka from the south, Ratna Heruka from the west, Padma Heruka from the north, and Karma Heruka from the center. Each one more intense than the last, each one challenging you to recognize fierce compassion as your own nature. Imagine facing beings that embody every aspect of yourself you've tried to keep under control. Vajra Heruka represents your capacity for righteous anger, not petty rage, but the fierce indignation that arises when truth is violated. Ratna Heruka embodies the pride that comes from recognizing your own Buddha nature, not ego pride, but the dignity of awakened consciousness. Padma Heruka manifests your passionate intensity, not neurotic attachment, but the fierce love that will stop at nothing to awaken all being. Karma Heruka represents your capacity for decisive action, not impulsive reactivity, but the swift compassion that responds instantly to suffering. The term blood drinking isn't literal, it's symbolic. These deities drink the blood of ego, the life force of illusion, the very essence of everything that keeps you trapped in suffering. They're performing the ultimate act of compassion by destroying everything false within you. Each encounter offers the same profound opportunity. If you can recognize these terrifying beings as aspects of your own awakened nature, if you can see their fierce expressions as manifestations of compassion rather than threat, you achieve liberation through the wrathful path. But most souls, faced with these blood-drinking Herukas, experience pure terror. The intensity is overwhelming. These beings seem to threaten everything you think you are, everything you've tried to protect and preserve. So consciousness retreats even further, missing yet another opportunity for freedom. Consider your own relationship with intensity. How do you react when life presents you with fierce challenges? Do you see them as opportunities for growth, or do you immediately go into defensive mode? The blood-drinking deities represent every intense experience you've ever labeled as negative when it was actually trying to liberate you. But the journey through the wrathful realm isn't finished. The encounters are about to become even more challenging, even more psychologically intense. Because on the 10th day, you face beings so fierce, so uncompromising in their compassion, that they're called the Karimas, the female wrathful deities whose very presence can either shatter your ego completely or drive you deeper into the illusion of separation. What if the most terrifying and liberating force in the universe appeared to you in the form of fierce feminine wisdom that refuses to accept any of your excuses, any of your spiritual bypassing, any of your attempts to remain small and safe? On the 10th day, consciousness encounters something that challenges every conventional notion of feminine energy. These aren't the gentle, nurturing mother figures that many spiritual traditions emphasize. These are the Karimas, 8 fierce female deities whose compassion is so uncompromising that it appears as terrifying feminine rage. From the 8 directions, they appear with animal heads that represent different aspects of awakened consciousness. Simhamukhi, the lion-faced one, emerges from the east with a corpse in her mouth, representing the death of ego. Vyagramukhi, the tiger-faced one, appears from the south, her claws ready to tear through every pretense. Picture Shrigalamukhi, the jackal-faced Karima from the west, holding a vajra and drinking blood from a skull cup. Imagine Shvanamukhi, the wolf-faced one from the north, wielding a curved knife that cuts through every spiritual delusion. Each one appears with a ferocity that seems to threaten the very foundations of your existence. But the terrestrial Karimas are just the beginning. From the sky realm appear 4 more. Gridamukhi, the vulture-faced one, Kankamukhi, with the face of a kite, Kakamukhi, the raven-faced deity, and Ulamukhi, the owl-faced one. Together, they create a mandala of fierce feminine wisdom that surrounds consciousness completely. These animal faces aren't random or primitive symbolism. The lion represents the courage to face truth. The tiger embodies the power to destroy illusion. The jackal symbolizes the wisdom that feeds on spiritual carrion, the death of false identities. The wolf represents the pack loyalty of awakened consciousness to all being. In many spiritual traditions, feminine energy is portrayed as exclusively gentle, nurturing, and receptive. But the Karimas reveal another aspect of the divine feminine, the fierce mother who will destroy anything that threatens her children's awakening, even if that threat comes from the children themselves. Think about the fierce, feminine energy in your own life. The mother who refuses to enable her child's destructive behavior. The teacher who won't accept mediocrity. The friend who calls you out on your self-deception. The Karimas represent this uncompromising love that appears as anger but is actually the deepest compassion. The Bardo Thodol instructs, "O child of noble family, these fierce goddesses are your own consciousness appearing in wrathful female form. They are not separate from you. Do not be terrified by their animal faces and fierce expressions. Recognize them as the protective aspects of your own awakened mind." But for most souls, the appearance of the Karimas triggers the deepest terror yet. There's something about fierce feminine energy that challenges the ego's sense of control more than anything else. These aren't beings you can negotiate with, manipulate, or charm. They see through everything, and they're not impressed by any of your spiritual achievements or excuses. How do you react to fierce feminine energy in your own life? Do you try to control it, dismiss it, or run from it? The Karimas represent every moment when life has presented you with uncompromising truth through feminine wisdom, and you've chosen comfort over growth. But here's what's profound about the Karimas. They're not trying to destroy you. They're trying to protect your Buddha nature from everything that would keep it imprisoned. Their fierce expressions are the face of love that refuses to enable your spiritual sleep. Yet the journey through the wrathful realm continues to intensify. The encounters you face so far are preparing you for something even more challenging. Because on the 11th day, you encounter the Pishachis, beings so fierce, so uncompromising in their wisdom, that they represent the ultimate test of whether you can see enlightened activity, even in its most terrifying forms. Imagine facing beings so intense, so psychologically challenging, that they represent every fear, every trauma, every aspect of existence you've spent your entire life trying to avoid, and discovering that they're actually the most compassionate forces in the universe, appearing in the only form fierce enough to break through your final resistance to awakening. On the 11th day, consciousness encounters the Pishachis, 28 wrathful deities whose very names strike terror into the unprepared mind. But these aren't demons from some external hell. They're the final, most intense manifestations of your own consciousness, appearing in forms so fierce that they can either shatter every last vestige of ego or drive you into the deepest levels of fear and resistance. First appear the 4 female gatekeepers of the wrathful mandala. Ankusha, the hook-bearer, emerges from the east with a horse's head, wielding an iron hook that can drag consciousness toward truth whether it wants to go or not. Pasha, the noose-bearer, appears from the south with a pig's head, holding the rope that binds you to reality. From the west comes Shrinkala, the chain-bearer, with a lion's head and iron chains that represent the unbreakable bonds of karma. From the north appears Ganta, the bell-bearer, with a snake's head, ringing the bell that awakens consciousness from every spiritual delusion. But these gatekeepers are just the beginning. 28 more Pishachis emerge, each one more psychologically intense than the last. There's Rakshasi with her yellow body and deer head, holding a vajra that represents indestructible truth. Brahmi appears with a white body and human head, wielding the staff of spiritual authority that brooks no compromise. Picture Mahadevi with her red body and dog head, holding the curved knife that cuts through every spiritual pretense. Imagine Loba with her red body and hoopoe head, carrying the hook that drags you toward confronting your deepest attachments. Each Pishaki represents a different aspect of fierce wisdom that refuses to let you remain unconscious. These animal heads aren't primitive or random. The deer represents the gentle nature that can become fierce when protecting truth. The dog symbolizes loyalty to awakening that will track down every hiding place of ego. The hoopoe represents the messenger that brings news you don't want to hear but desperately need. Every weapon these beings carry is a tool of liberation, disguised as an instrument of terror. The curved knives cut through attachment. The hooks drag you toward truth. The nooses bind you to reality. The clubs destroy every false refuge. To the ego, they appear as threats. To awakened consciousness, they're the most precious gifts imaginable. The Pishachis represent every aspect of existence that your ego has labeled as negative or evil. They embody your capacity for righteous anger, your ability to say no to what doesn't serve awakening, your willingness to destroy what needs to be destroyed for new life to emerge. The Bardo Thodol declares, "O child of noble family, these terrifying Pishachis are not external demons, but your own consciousness appearing in wrathful form. They are the fierce protectors of your Buddha nature. Do not flee from them in terror. Recognize them as the guardians of your own awakened mind. This is the ultimate test of spiritual courage. Can you look at the most terrifying aspects of existence, death, destruction, fierce truth, uncompromising love, and recognize them as expressions of enlightened compassion? Can you see that sometimes the most loving thing consciousness can do is appear in a form so fierce that it shatters every comfortable illusion? But for most souls, the appearance of the Pishachis represents the final breaking point. The terror is too intense, the challenge too overwhelming. They retreat into the deepest levels of fear and resistance, missing the ultimate opportunity to recognize fierce compassion as their own nature. Think about the Pishachis in your own life. The experiences, people, or situations that have appeared terrifying but were actually trying to wake you up. The job loss that forced you to find your true calling. The relationship ending that freed you from settling for less than love. The illness that taught you what really matters. With the appearance of the Pishachis, the cycle of wrathful deities reaches its completion. 58 fierce beings have appeared over 7 days, each one offering liberation through the recognition of fierce compassion as your own nature. Each encounter was a chance to see that what appears as terror is actually the most uncompromising love. The wrathful deities reveal the profound truth that enlightenment isn't always gentle. Sometimes awakening requires a force so fierce, so uncompromising, that it can break through lifetimes of resistance, denial, and spiritual bypassing. But what happens if consciousness retreats from all 58 wrathful deities? What occurs when even fierce compassion can't break through the barriers of fear and resistance? The journey isn't over. It's about to enter its final, most crucial phase. What if everything you've been taught about love and compassion is only half the truth? What if the universe loves you so much that it's willing to appear terrifying in order to wake you up from the comfortable sleep of spiritual mediocrity. Now that you've journeyed through the complete mandala of wrathful deities, it's time to understand the profound truth that underlies every fierce encounter. These beings aren't appearing to punish, threaten, or destroy you. They're manifesting as the ultimate expression of protective love, the kind of compassion that's fierce enough to save you from your own resistance to awakening. In Tibetan Buddhism, wrathful deities are called protectors, not because they protect you from external enemies, but because they protect your Buddha nature from the internal enemies of ignorance, attachment, and fear. They're like spiritual immune systems, appearing whenever consciousness is threatened by forces that would keep it asleep. Consider Mahottara, one of the most fierce protector deities in Tibetan Buddhism. His name literally means great time, representing the force that devours everything impermanent, everything false, everything that pretends to be eternal when it's actually just ego clinging. His terrifying appearance is the face of time itself, showing you that everything you're trying to hold on to will eventually be taken away. But this destruction is the deepest compassion. Imagine a surgeon who must cut through healthy tissue to remove a life-threatening tumor. To the patient, the knife appears as an instrument of harm, but the surgeon knows that this cutting is the most loving act possible. The wrathful deities are the surgeons of consciousness, cutting away everything that threatens your spiritual life. Carl Jung understood this when he wrote about the necessity of integrating the shadow. He recognized that the aspects of ourselves we most fear and reject often contain the very qualities we need for wholeness. The wrathful deities represent this shadow integration on a cosmic scale, forcing you to embrace every aspect of consciousness, even the parts that terrify you. The Karimas, those fierce feminine deities with animal heads, represent the protective mother energy that will destroy anything threatening her children's awakening. Think of a mother bear protecting her cubs. Her ferocity isn't cruelty, it's the most intense love imaginable. The Karimas embody this same energy on a spiritual level. Each wrathful deity represents the transformation of a specific emotion or mental state. Anger becomes mirror-like wisdom that sees clearly without distortion. Fear becomes discriminating awareness that recognizes what serves awakening and what doesn't. Attachment becomes all-accomplishing wisdom that acts spontaneously for the benefit of all being. This is spiritual alchemy at its most profound level. The wrathful deities don't eliminate negative emotions, they transform them into their enlightened essence. Your capacity for anger becomes your capacity for righteous indignation against injustice. Your tendency toward fear becomes your ability to discriminate between what's truly dangerous and what's just ego resistance. In many spiritual traditions, initiation involves facing your deepest fears in a controlled, sacred context. The encounter with wrathful deities is the ultimate initiation, a test of whether you can see enlightened activity even when it appears in its most challenging form. This teaching has profound implications for how you approach difficult experiences in life. Every challenging situation, every person who triggers you, every circumstance that brings up fear or anger, all of these can be seen as wrathful deities appearing to help you grow. The key is learning to ask the right question when faced with intensity. Instead of, "How can I avoid this?" or "Why is this happening to me?" the question becomes, "What is this fierce experience trying to teach me? How is this challenging situation actually serving my awakening?" Developing the courage to face wrathful deities begins with small acts of bravery in daily life. Every time you choose truth over comfort, growth over safety, authenticity over approval, you're building the spiritual muscle needed to recognize fierce compassion as love. The wrathful deities offer the ultimate protection. They protect you from remaining unconscious. They guard your Buddha nature from the forces of spiritual sleep. They ensure that no matter how comfortable you become in your limitations, there will always be a force fierce enough to wake you up. This reveals one of the deepest paradoxes of spiritual life. Sometimes the most loving thing the universe can do is appear unloving. Sometimes the greatest compassion manifests as apparent cruelty. Sometimes the deepest protection comes through experiences that feel like attacks. But understanding the protective nature of wrathful compassion raises the ultimate question: how do you prepare for these encounters? How do you develop the courage to see fierce love as love? How do you train your consciousness to recognize wrathful deities as your own awakened nature? If you knew that someday you would face the most terrifying and liberating test of your existence, a test that could either free you forever or trap you in cycles of fear, Wouldn't you want to prepare for it with the same intensity that athletes train for the Olympics? The encounter with wrathful deities isn't something that only happens after death. These fierce aspects of consciousness are appearing in your life right now, in every challenging situation, every difficult person, every experience that triggers fear or resistance. Learning to recognize them now is the key to liberation, both in life and in the bardos. The first and most crucial preparation is what psychologists call shadow work, the practice of consciously engaging with the aspects of yourself you've rejected, denied, or tried to hide. Every quality you judge in others, every emotion you try to suppress, every part of yourself you consider unspiritual, these are the raw materials that will appear as wrathful deities. Begin each day by asking yourself, what am I trying to avoid today? What emotion am I resisting? What truth am I not willing to face? Then, instead of pushing these things away, practice sitting with them, breathing with them, recognizing them as aspects of your own consciousness that want to be integrated. Specifically, work with anger, not by suppressing it, but by understanding its enlightened essence. When you feel angry, ask, what boundary is being violated? What truth is trying to emerge? How is this anger actually serving awakening? Practice seeing anger as energy that can be transformed into clear, decisive action. Similarly, work with fear as a teacher rather than an enemy. Every fear contains information about what you're attached to, what you're trying to control, what you haven't yet surrendered. Practice moving toward your fears with curiosity rather than resistance, asking, what is this fear trying to protect? What would happen if I let go of what I'm trying to preserve? Advanced practitioners engage in specific meditations on wrathful deity. Visualize Mahottara, or one of the Karimas, in all their fierce glory. Instead of trying to make them less frightening, practice sitting with the intensity, breathing with the terror, until you can see the compassion behind the fierce expression. Practice Tonglen, taking and giving, meditation specifically with difficult emotions. When you encounter anger, fear, or any intense emotion, either in yourself or others, breathe it in fully, then breathe out peace and understanding. This trains your consciousness to transform intensity rather than resist it. Regularly contemplate your own death, but specifically focus on the possibility of encountering wrathful deity. Imagine facing beings that embody every aspect of yourself you've tried to hide. Practice responding with recognition rather than retreat. This terrifying being is my own consciousness. This fierce energy is my own awakened nature. In traditional practice, students sometimes visualize their spiritual teacher in wrathful form, not as a punishment, but as a way of recognizing that true spiritual guidance sometimes appears fierce. This prepares the mind to see wisdom even when it comes in challenging packages. Most importantly, use every difficult situation in your life as practice for the wrathful deity. That person who triggers your anger, practice seeing them as Mahottara, appearing to teach you about transformed rage. That situation that brings up terror, recognize it as one of the Karimas helping you face your deepest fears. Build courage gradually. Start with small acts of facing what you'd rather avoid. Have that difficult conversation. Look at that aspect of yourself you've been denying. Choose growth over comfort in small ways every day. Each act of courage builds the spiritual strength needed for the ultimate encounters. Find others who are doing this deep work. The path of facing wrathful deities is not meant to be walked alone. Share your fears, your insights, your breakthroughs with others who understand that spiritual growth sometimes requires facing what terrifies us most. Study the detailed descriptions of wrathful deities in the Bardo Thodol and other Tibetan texts. Familiarize yourself with their appearances, their symbolism, their meanings. The more you understand these beings intellectually, the more likely you are to recognize them when they appear. But the deepest preparation is simply this: begin to see every challenging experience as a gift from your own awakened consciousness. Start to recognize that the universe loves you so much that it's willing to appear terrifying in order to wake you up. Practice gratitude for the fierce experiences that force you to grow. As you begin to work with these practices, something remarkable happens. You start to develop what Tibetan masters call fearless confidence. Not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward with courage even when you're terrified. You begin to see that your capacity to face intensity is actually your capacity for liberation. What if the most terrifying experiences of your life, past, present, and future, are actually the most compassionate forces in the universe, appearing in the only form fierce enough to break through your resistance to becoming who you truly are. Because here's the profound truth that the wrathful deities reveal. You are not a fragile being who needs protection from intensity. You are consciousness itself, temporarily wearing the costume of a human life. The wrathful deities aren't coming to destroy you. They're coming to remind you that you're indestructible, that your true nature is so vast and powerful that it can embrace even the most terrifying experiences as expressions of love. Every difficult person in your life, every challenging situation, every moment of fear or anger, these are all wrathful deities, appearing to help you recognize your own fierce compassion. They're not obstacles to your spiritual growth. They're the very mechanism through which awakening occurs. Starting today, begin to see your life through the lens of wrathful deity practice. When someone triggers your anger, silently thank them for appearing as Mahottara to teach you about transformed rage. When fear arises, recognize it as one of the Karimas, helping you develop spiritual courage. When life presents you with intensity, ask, how is this fierce experience serving my awakening? Tonight, before you sleep, spend 5 minutes contemplating the most challenging experience you're currently facing. Instead of seeing it as a problem to solve, practice seeing it as a wrathful deity appearing to liberate you from some limitation you've been carrying. Ask, what is this fierce teacher trying to show me about my own strength? I want to hear from you in the comments below. Share one challenging experience you're currently facing and practice reframing it as a wrathful deity appearing to help you grow. What might this fierce teacher be trying to show you? Because this journey of recognizing fierce compassion is meant to be walked together. Now, some of you might be thinking, this is just spiritual bypassing. Not everything difficult is a gift, and you're right to be cautious. The teaching of wrathful deities isn't about accepting abuse or avoiding necessary action. It's about developing the inner strength to face whatever arises with courage and wisdom, whether that means setting boundaries, making changes, or simply enduring with grace. Understanding the wrathful deities completes our exploration of the peaceful and wrathful phases of the bardo. But the journey of consciousness doesn't end here. If the soul retreats from both peaceful and wrathful opportunities for liberation, it enters the final phase, the bardo of rebirth, where the next life is determined by the karmic patterns that remain unresolved. But for now, let this teaching settle into your consciousness. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are not at the mercy of external forces. You are consciousness itself, and every experience, no matter how challenging, is an opportunity to recognize your own indestructible nature. So here's my challenge to you. Live the next 24 hours as if every difficult experience is a wrathful deity appearing to help you grow. Practice seeing fierce love as love. Develop the courage to face what you've been avoiding, because the wrathful deities aren't waiting for you to die to test your courage. They're testing it right now. In every moment you choose growth over comfort, truth over safety, awakening over sleep. Drop a comment below with the word courage if you're ready to start seeing challenging experiences as opportunities for liberation. Hit subscribe if you want to continue exploring these profound teachings about consciousness and awakening, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that their struggles might actually be their greatest teachers. Next week, we're going to explore what happens when consciousness retreats from both peaceful and wrathful opportunities for liberation, the bardo of rebirth, where your next life is shaped by every unresolved pattern, every unhealed wound, every choice you make in those crucial moments between death and rebirth. Until then, may you recognize the wrathful deities appearing in every challenging moment of your life. May you develop the courage to see fierce love as love. And may you remember that you are not a fragile human having spiritual experiences, indestructible consciousness, temporarily exploring what it means to be beautifully, courageously human. The wrathful deities are not your enemies. They are your fiercest allies, appearing in the only form powerful enough to wake you up from the comfortable sleep of limitation. The question is, do you have the courage to let them?